start shortly. The proceeding will 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 start shortly. The proceeding.
Order. Martyn Day to move the motion.
Thank you. I beg to move that this House has considered E-petition 602285 relating to the use of real bearskins for the Queen's Guard's caps. The petition calls for real bearskins used for the Queen's Guard caps to be replaced with a faux fur alternative. The petition has gathered in excess of 106,000 signatures, and it is not difficult to see why, given the strength of feeling which exists in the UK against wearing animal fur. Indeed, many of the highest signing constituencies are Scottish ones, which is also not surprising, as MOD procurement policies and regulation of international affairs are currently reserved matters and require action by the UK government. Indeed, as the petition itself states, 93% of people in the UK would refuse to wear animal fur, including Her Majesty the Queen, the regiment's namesake, who has acknowledged the changing societal attitudes towards the issue and who no longer buys fur for her own wardrobe.
Hear, hear.
Furthermore, a populous opinion poll held in March 2022 revealed that 75% of the UK population considered the use of real bearskins to be a bad use of taxpayers' money and support the government taking action to replace bearskins with faux fur. Frankly, at this juncture, what is difficult to understand is why the government would wish to continue with the use of an animal product resulting from slaughtered bears for ceremonial headgear in the face of such strong public opinion. In its response to the petition, the government argue that the bear pelts used are byproducts of a licensed cull by Canadian authorities and that bears are never hunted to order for use by the MOD. Yet, in 2001, Freedom of Information requests made by PETA, the Army Secretariat conceded that it does not know the details of the supply chain, that the MOD receives the final product from its suppliers, and that it seems is that. Furthermore, previous inquiries made by PETA to both the federal and provincial Canadian governments revealed that no formal cull of bears exists in any territory of Canada. What is known, however, is that the Canadian government issues hunting tags annually to licensed hunting enthusiasts, and that once in possession of these tags, hunters are free to bait and kill bears. To be clear, this hunting involves the violent killing of bears, with many bears being shot several times. In some provinces, the use of the bow and arrow is permitted, leading to a slow and painful death for those poor animals. Some Canadian territories have spring hunts, meaning that even nursing mother bears are being killed, leaving cubs to starve. The incentive to hunt and kill bears is greater if there is a buyer for the fur. It seems undeniable, therefore, that by continuing to purchase hats made from the fur of black bears, the MOD is funding the suffering of bears in Canada by making the baiting and killing of these animals and the sale of their pelts a profitable pursuit for the hunters. To make this connection here clear, at least one bear is killed to produce a single cap. In 2020, the government purchased 100 caps in that year alone. At least 100 bears were killed and their pelts used to produce the Queen's Guards caps. The government argues that there is currently no non-animal alternative available that meets its essential criterion, and that any alternative material must meet 5 criteria. I understand that these 5 requirements concern water absorption, water penetration, appearance, drying rate, and compression. In the response to the petition, the government goes on to highlight the man-made fabric manufactured by Ecopel, which was passed to an independent testing house by PETA, and the results shared with the MOD. The government states that its analysis of these results showed the faux fur alternative only met one of the 5 requirements it needed to meet to be considered as a viable alternative for ceremonial caps. The government response goes on to say that whilst it met the basic standard for water absorption, the faux fur alternative did not perform well in terms of water shedding or on the visual assessment. Yet PETA have revealed that new tests conducted between December 2020 and April 2022 have shown that Ecopel's faux fur product performs in a very similar way to, or in some instances, better than real bear fur in all the government's identified. Would
the Honourable agree that it would be really helpful if those analysis was shared with the MOD so we could have a look at that for ourselves? We've not yet had any access to that data, and we would like to find an alternative. If they do prove useful, that's something we take very seriously, but that's not been shared with the MOD.
Martyn Day.
I thank the Minister for that intervention. I'll hopefully come on to some of that later, and I believe the point he's made will have been heard by the campaign group, and I would certainly echo his call to share for transparency. Indeed, one of my requests from today is for the Ministers to meet with PETA to discuss things further, and I hope he can take that on board and things can get moving to everybody's satisfaction. Let us examine these areas and the results in more detail. Firstly, on water absorption. PETA have revealed that tests conducted at Interreg, an MOD-accredited laboratory, on the 18th of December 2020 showed that when wet, the faux bear fur performs similarly to real bear fur. Water poured on a real bearskin sample and then a faux fur sample showed that the water run off both samples in several places. Both samples, when wet, formed tendrils, and when shaken, water droplets were shaken off both samples. On water penetration, the same test assessed how much water, if any, penetrated the cap. The faux fur cap, like the bearskin cap, showed no wetting at the back of the sample, meaning it is completely waterproof. On appearance, the machinery used by EcoPel ensures that the strands of faux bear fur would match the exact length of real bear fur, which is 9.5 centimetres. If you consider images of a bearskin cap and a faux fur cap side by side, they are virtually indistinguishable from each other.
I'm very grateful for giving away. I won't make a habit of this, I promise. I don't know if the Honourable Gentleman has actually seen the creation of the bearskin through faux fur. I'm not aware that one has been. I don't know whether it's possible to stretch the faux fur over the wicker in order to create a bearskin. And then what happens, for example, on the drilling of the holes to keep it together, whether that's then still preventing water penetration. I don't expect the Honourable Gentleman to have any answers to that, but those are the kind of things we do need to understand if it's to be a viable alternative, which it may be, but we don't know yet.
I thank the Minister. I appreciate his constructive approach to the debate, and I think we can keep this going, given how few backbenchers have came along today. I haven't seen them being made physically. I've seen photographs of the end product, and I would be more than happy to join with the Minister and actually see them being made.
We actually did have a couple of examples of the faux bearskins at a reception I hosted just a couple of months ago. What I would say is it's all well good the MOD asking for details of the data from Peter. It would also be very helpful if the MOD were saying the exact criteria they would need for this material to be met, so that we can keep on, rather than having a to and fro constantly, we can meet a criteria and then offer a truly, genuinely cruelty-free solution for it.
I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention. That's a very helpful piece of information, and I think there's a willingness in this room that everybody should get together to try and move this debate forward out with this chamber. On the drying rate, the faux fur cap has been shown to perform better than real bearskin with a faster drying rate. On the 14th of April 2022, 4 laboratory tests showed that the faux fur sample had an average drying rate of 83.3% over a 24-hour period. Real bearskin, by contrast, has a drying rate of 64.1% over 24 hours, meaning that the faux fur alternative is 19.2% better at drying. Finally, on compression, the faux fur fabric performed well in tests also conducted in April, returning to within 5 millimetres of its original height within 45 minutes and achieving full thickness shortly after. To compare, real bear fur has a compression recovery rate of 45 minutes, meaning that both perform similarly. Based on these results released by PETA, it's hard to understand the government's assertion that faux fur alternative does not meet its requirements. And I would challenge the government to explain fully the issues it has with faux fur alternatives' water shedding performance and its concerns about visual appearance of the cap. To be clear, there is potential for an alternative here, and one which ends this government's involvement with the cruel killing of bears. If there are issues and concerns about this alternative, I would urge the government to work to resolve these. Indeed, I take some comfort from the interventions that the Minister has made that there may be a willingness to do that. In particular, I would ask the government to meet with representatives from PETA to progress this and to work to create a faux fur cap which is suitable. In the past 7 years, the government has spent in excess of £1 million on caps, which, in my opinion, serve no military purpose. Caps which have a clear connections to trophy hunting. At a time when there is a private member's bill before this House to prohibit the import of wild animal specimens derived from trophy hunting. It has been said that these bearskin caps are part of the UK's military tradition, not least by the current Secretary of State for Defence in an amendment to an early day motion in 2006. As the writer and philosopher K.G. Chesterton tells us, tradition means giving votes to the most obscure of all classes, our ancestors. It is the democracy of the dead. Instead of giving deference to tradition, we ought to acknowledge that society and attitudes have moved on. Technology has moved on. And I ask the government now to embrace modernity and technology and progress, and to find a solution which ends its involvement with the cruel and barbaric practices towards bears. In conclusion, I believe that the MOD has questions to answer today, and I do hope that the Minister will, as I have requested, agree to meet with PETA. But it's fair to say that the UK Government's Department for International Trade also has a role in this matter. The UK Government is banning the export of fur, but with failures to legislate in the Animals Abroad Bill and paralysis around the Kept Animals Bill, it is imperative that the UK Government get a grip and better protect animals. So I urge the UK Government to make the right decision, listen to the people and to morality, and prohibit the import of new fur products. Thank you.
Question is that this House has considered E-petition 602285 relating to the use of real bearskin hats by the Queen's Guards. Margaret Ferrier.
Thank you, Ms Vargan. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. I would like to thank the Honourable Member for Linlithgow and East Falkirk for opening today's debate, and to the more than 100,000 members of the public that signed E-petition 602285, including the 116 of those from my constituency in Rutherglen and Hamilton West. I'd also like to give thanks to Alicia Dixon, Virginia Lewis-Jones and Andy Knott, co-sponsors of this petition, all vocal advocates for animal welfare, and I thank them for their contributions to this campaign. The use of real bearskin in ceremonial caps is antiquated, costly and unnecessary. It shouldn't take 100,000 signatures in a debate for the government to acknowledge that. In fact, the opening line of the government response to this petition is that currently we have no plans to end the use of bearskins. Granted, the full response is slightly more in-depth, but really continues to be inadequate. While the Ministry of Defence might argue there are valid reasons to continue the use of bear pelts in its ceremonial garments, to present the line, Guardsmen take great pride in wearing the bearskin cap, which is an iconic image of Britain, as an argument to continue this practice is embarrassing. There are alternatives on the market, as PETA have demonstrated with EcoPel, and faux fur has been the norm for decades now. Vanity cosmetic appeal should not form part of this debate. It does not hold water, never mind the fact that the newly developed faux bearskin actually matches the current appearance requirements. Advances in the technology that has developed faux fur, like EcoPel, mean that it is practically indistinguishable from the real thing. If we look back at the written government response to this petition, we see that they need the material to perform, as we've heard, across 5 requirements. In addition to the need to look smart, those requirements are water absorption, water penetration, appearance, drying rate and compression. The government response also states that EcoPel performs satisfactorily in only 1. As a result, they reaffirmed their position that they will not be taking faux bearskin alternatives forward. The MOD's defence that the bearskin is obtained through licensed Canadian culls and therefore a reduction in Britain's procurement would not lead to a reduction in bear deaths is weak. A vegetarian doesn't say, well, I can eat this steak because the cow is already dead and it's reached the supermarket shelves. Morally, it's unreasonable to hide behind this argument. The UK charity Bear Conservation and PETA have highlighted several worrying elements of the Canadian bear culls too, noting many Canadian provinces allow bear hunts in the spring when these bears are just coming out of hibernation and are in a weakened state. Some provinces don't have restrictions on the hunting of mother bears with nursing cubs, leading to the killing of entire bear families or orphan cubs left abandoned to die because they can't fend for themselves. Recreational hunters are also granted licence to participate in bear hunting or culls. This brings in a concerning element of sport. PETA report that some use bows and arrows, for example, meaning that the bears do not die instantly. It can be a slow and painful death. By financing these activities and by continuing to participate in that supply chain, taxpayer money is being spent on an industry, Canadian state-sanctioned or not, that profits from the suffering of bears. The financial cost of these caps is huge. £1 million spent on 819 caps in 7 years. Now, in terms of government projects and funding streams, that might not seem like a lot of money, but it really is, especially in today's economic climate, with a fast-growing cost of living crisis and families struggling to put food on the table or keep the lights on. PETA have offered EcoPel fur to the MOD free of charge until 2030, providing much-needed relief in the public purse. If it truly doesn't meet the requirements, and the lack of detail provided so far on why makes me wonder then, why doesn't the MOD offer to join with PETA and EcoPel to strengthen the product, to build on the progress already made to make a faux fur product that does the job in both appearance and practicality? Production of fur in the UK is illegal, and for the most part imports are, although there are exceptions. Continuing to use real bearskins is just outsourcing animal cruelty overseas. It's hypocrisy. The overwhelming majority of the UK public are strongly opposed to fur. That will inevitably include some of the very guardsmen that have to wear these caps. I don't want to be too hard on the MOD because I know there is some truly excellent work going on there, particularly with the current international state of play in Ukraine. But I do worry there is a double standard, practices that are unnecessary, even cruel, that are supported indirectly by the department. And I've received many emails from constituents, for example, about the use of MOD land for trail hunting being used as a smokescreen for fox hunting. I appreciate the Minister joining us here today and look forward to his reply. I understand policy changes take time, but I hope that the response will not just be a fleshed-out repeat of the petition's written response. I hope that all the points that have been raised on behalf of members' constituents will be considered and addressed, and that this debate can make some forward movement away from the use of bearskins. We need to do better. This isn't a fringe view anymore. This is the shared view of most of the British public who do not want to see their hard-earned tax spent in this way.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I'm grateful for the honourable member for hosting this debate on behalf of the Petitions Committee, and I'm glad we have an opportunity, Madam Chairman, this afternoon to discuss the subject of bearskins. But I also can't help but also feel a sense of despair. I mean, I've stood in this particular chamber and also in this House on a number of occasions, speaking in debates on banning fur imports into this great country, and I believe that a ban, if introduced, should also extend to bearskins. For each of the caps used by the Queen's Guard, a bear is cruelly killed by being shot or ensnared, Madam Chairman, sometimes for days in a painful trap, and British people, and a good 95% of good British people, object to killing animals for fur and are unwittingly paying for it through their taxes. For nearly 2 centuries, the MOD has waged war on black bears while doing almost nothing to further the search for materials to replace the use of their skins, and it quite simply isn't good enough in 2022, Madam Chairman. There is no reason why the MOD should continue to use real bear fur in these purely ornamental caps that serve no military purpose, as has been discussed already, when a nearly indistinguishable faux fur has been developed. I've had a chance to see the fabric for myself, as I said in an intervention earlier, and can attest to the fact that pleasure to give way.
I'm glad to see the material for himself. We haven't in the MOD. So I've seen photographs, but I'm assuming they might have been digital mock-ups. I've got no idea whether a bearskin cap made of faux fur exists, what it looks like when subjected to water, and bear in mind that the guardsmen we're talking about have to wear this often in cold weather, often in very wet weather, for long periods of time. I know the honourable gentleman, as would I, would want an alternative that actually works. So without seeing the sample, it's quite hard to check if it does hit those tests. We would like to see it.
I thank the Minister for that intervention. I speak as a scientist as well, and I work from evidence. I'm sensing a desire almost from the Minister, and hopefully not putting words in his mouth, that he's open for dialogue. And if it is suitable and fits all the criteria that the MOD can give, then hopefully we are finding a solution. I'm sensing a tad bit of reticence there, though. But as I've said before, we've had...
The honourable gentleman should be aware that where sustainable, affordable and suitably appropriate material exists at SFO, we've used it. So the Busby caps of the Royal Horse Artillery being a prime example. But it's hard to agree to use a material if you haven't seen the material.
Thank the Minister for the second intervention. I'm sure we can get a sample of the material for yourself and for the MOD to peruse and run further tests on. Madam Chairman, as I've said, the fact that there is a virtual identical alternative is hopefully something we should all be supporting and can hopefully get behind. So whilst this material is waterproof and lighter than real fur, it makes for a comfortable alternative for our soldiers to wear also. So I've seen reports from an independent fabric expert who's concluded that the animal-friendly material meets or in some areas actually exceeds. And I'm aware this will need to go through further testing for the MOD's criteria. And it would allow for the Ministry to actually retain the aesthetic approach for the caps, whilst in a way also meeting a much more modern and aligned value of preventing cruelty. So it's my understanding too that the MOD have been offered the fabric, which would be free of charge right up until 2030. So if they were to stick to the current fur material, it would cost well in excess of £1 million a year. So it's not just the moral thing to do, but it's the fiscally responsible thing to do as well. So this then begs the question as to why the MOD haven't acted, if not out of mere tradition. So the idea that the Guardsmen take great pride in wearing the current cap and would be somehow upset if a cruelty-free material was used just appears to be a fallacy to me. Even more so as previously stated when the Queen herself refuses to wear fur. So there are many traditions that this country has left by the wayside and consigned to the history books, either because they were cruel, they were inhumane, they were outdated, or in some cases just plain wrong. To stick with something through familiarity and continue to waste taxpayers' money doesn't strike a chord of Britain as a strong, advanced, forward-looking nation. It smacks of a country stuck in the past, refusing to move with the times. So I would urge the Minister to look at the evidence put forward in the debate today, but I'm hopefully reassured by some of the comments he's making that he is open to meaningful dialogue, and we can hopefully find a strong solution for this moving forward, because for new caps, which in my view are a very good replica and much more ethical, 100 recyclable and most importantly cruelty-free. So I hope we don't go back into another year, Madam Chairman, hearing about one more black bear being mindlessly and pointlessly killed to keep tradition happy.
Thank you very much. Indeed, Chair, it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I thank the honourable member for Linlithgow and East Falkirk for securing this important debate. None of us, it's clear, like the idea of a bear being killed to make a hat. Some of us think it's unforgivably cruel and inexcusable. Others think that while it may be unpleasant, it's justified by tradition. Previously, it was impossible to reconcile these two positions, but no longer. The bear hunt itself isn't the purpose of this activity, we are told by ministers. It's not like fox hunting, where redcoats and exhausted fox and blood are apparently part of the fun. The hunting of bears serves only one purpose: to procure fur for a hat which, it's argued, looks good and honours a tradition going back centuries. Therefore, if a product can be found which is in every way as handsome and durable as that obtained from a living creature killed for the purpose, but involving no death, we can all surely agree that this is the ideal outcome. So, why do we seem to be making so little progress moving from bearskins to cruelty-free synthetic alternatives? In April this year, I hosted a reception here at Westminster in conjunction with the charity PETA to raise awareness about this issue, and I can confirm to the honourable member that the hat that he's asked several questions about was there. I got to hold it, I got to wear it. Others, I'm sure, look much better in it, but it exists. So we can clear that one up immediately. But importantly, on the day of the reception, the Secretary of State for Defence wrote to all MPs attempting to justify the continued wearing by soldiers of hats made out of real fur. His defence of the practice had two principal grounds. First, that synthetic alternatives still failed the Ministry of Defence quality control, which living bears sadly pass. And second, that bears are not wantonly killed for the purpose of making caps. The bears would be killed anyway as part of a regulated licensed cull by the Canadian authorities to manage the wild bear population. These two claims should not be hard for the MOD to prove. Nonetheless, it took a Freedom of Information request to extract some answers. PETA, the animal rights charity, asked whether the hunts kill bears to order for the MOD. In other words, if a certain number of hats are required, would a certain number of bears be killed in order to make them? And we can all see why that matters. If it's all about managing the bear population, the number killed wouldn't be based on the number of hats needed. The MOD's answer, I quote, "No information in scope of this element of your request is held by the department." Sounds like a computer writing. So there's no basis for the Secretary of State to assert that the bears would be killed anyway. He doesn't know. It may well be that the bears are only killed... Yes?
I just want to try and help them on that one point. As far as I'm aware, the last research I've seen was 2007, which is Hristienko, H. and Janie MacDonald, who estimated the Canadian black bear population to be around 434,400. I understand, and this is not work from the Ministry of Defence, this is the Canadian government, and it's a report from 2017, that the Canadian government reckoned then that there's about a 5 to 6% human-induced mortality, including cars and train crashes sadly involving bears, and the Honourable Gentleman can do the maths. In the last financial year, we bought 31 bearskins. So I totally appreciate there's a point of principle here, and that, I'm sure, is a point which the Honourable Gentleman is driving at. I don't think the numbers would suggest that there is an appreciable impact on the number of bears killed through licensed culls because of orders from the Ministry of Defence, though I fully appreciate it's a matter of principle for the Honourable Gentleman, which I respect.
OK, and it is a matter of principle. It's not the number of bears killed, but the principle. And of course, it wouldn't be a difficult question for the MOD to answer, but the MOD chose not to answer, and it said it couldn't answer because it didn't have the information. So perhaps the Honourable Gentleman might like to update the MOD on that. It's clear that there's no basis for the Secretary of State to assert that the bears would be killed anyway. He just doesn't know. It may well be that the bears are only killed because he orders a certain number of hats, whatever that number is. In fact, that seems highly unlikely. In truth, there is not, and never has been, any evidence of a widespread licensed cull authorised by the Canadian authorities. It just sounds better when MPs and campaigners ask awkward questions, as we are doing today. The evidence, to address the Honourable Gentleman's point, is that most bears in Canada are killed by trophy hunters who know that there is a market for the skins. Canadian government culls are very infrequent and only authorised to kill the small number of bears straying too close to human habitation. The MOD has no idea what the provenance is of the dead bears that it buys. The evidence, again, is that they are often nursing mothers. When they're killed to make a hat, their cubs starve to death. So that deals with the first MOD claim. It just doesn't stand up. So let's turn to the second claim made by the Defence Secretary in his letter to MPs. You'll remember that was about the look, quality and durability of faux fur alternatives to a living bear's skin. PETA has commissioned an alternative faux fur product. It's called EcoPel. It's been tested to rigorous standards. It lasts longer than real animal fur, which is a short post-mortem lifespan. That's why we have to keep on killing bears. One generation of soldiers can't pass on a cap made from real bearskin to the next generation. Real bearskins fall apart. By contrast, faux fur does not wilt and decay. It lasts longer. It looks indistinguishable from real fur. And in fact, Madam Chair, I can attest to that. My partner has been abused in public by animal rights activists, hooligans, no doubt, for wearing what they thought was real animal fur. It wasn't. It was faux fur. Now, faux fur is more water-resistant too. It will also, as we've heard, be free of charge to the public purse. Ecopel say that they'll provide, without cost, custom-made hats to the MOD for a decade. Hats that now exist because I've seen them. I would advocate that the honourable gentleman has a look. Now, this all sounds good, I'd have thought, but not apparently to the Defence Secretary. He said that the faux fur did not meet necessary standards. So what are those standards? How did he test them? I don't think it's unreasonable to ask that the Minister shares the analysis, because he didn't. But if there are specific detailed requirements that Ecopel needs to address, then if the MOD share the requirements, Ecopel and PETA have undertaken to meet them. And I think we have some agreement on this point. We can move forward. This is the first of two animal welfare debates this evening. The second is a debate looking at the violent whaling and dolphin killing in the Faroe Islands. Both debates come at a point of friction between tradition and animal welfare. But for traditions to be transferred from generation to generation, they must evolve and adapt. We cannot defend cruelty on the basis of tradition, otherwise we'd still be bear baiting. Come to think of it, we may still be. My constituents in Oakville and South Perthshire and the country at large care passionately about animal rights, as I know from the correspondence I've received people do across the country. People find it jarring to see soldiers wearing hats made out of dead bears when a viable, affordable and ethical alternative is available. They've pressed me to get answers today, and they are watching. Now, of course, it may well be that we're all shadowboxing. It may well be that the Secretary of State and the MOD have no intention ever of replacing real fur with a cruelty-free alternative, that they don't care how the bears are killed, that they don't care whether faux fur is as good as or better than real fur as a product. But that's not what they say. So if that's what they mean, will they please say what they mean and mean what they say? Thank you.
It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, Ms Favarg. The men and women that make up our armed forces keep our nation safe, and we are immensely proud of each and every one of them. We also recognise and take pride in the many traditions of our armed forces, including the ceremonial caps worn by the Queen's Guards. Indeed, before the use of khakis, these iconic caps were worn more widely amongst our forces, most notably during the Crimea War. They also remain an important symbol of our country to this day. People travel from across the world to see them at the gates of Buckingham Palace, and they are a staple at ceremonies like Troop in the Colour, Jubilee celebrations, and other vital moments in our history. Whilst backing our armed forces and these traditions, Labour also backs high animal welfare standards. And it is for this reason we also recognise the very real concerns about the use of bearskin for ceremonial caps. It is understood to make just one cap takes the skin of at least one bear, and as such we strongly believe that no bear should ever be hunted or killed to order for use by the Ministry of Defence. The price of real fur caps has also risen in recent years, increasing to over £1,700 per bearskin, over £1 million in recent years, as outlined by the member for Rutherglen and Hamilton West. The Defence Secretary has said that there is no non-animal alternatives that are available and suitable for use as ceremonial caps. In contrast, we know that the Queen announced she would stop wearing fur in 2019, as the member who led the debate highlighted. I'd like to ask the Minister how many alternatives to real bearskin hats have been tested to date. What faux fur is used by the King's Troop, and how does this fail to meet the criterion for the Queen's Guard caps? Despite outlining problems with fake fur options, including failing watershedding criteria and visual assessments, the Department has not published any of the analysis or data that substance these claims. This is not good enough. Alternatives to the use of real fur must be fully assessed and the results made public, as the member for Bury South argued. More than 100,000 people have signed the petition leading to this debate, clearly showing that it's something that the public care about deeply. The government owe the public complete transparency on this matter. I would like to therefore ask the Minister today if he will commit to an immediate review of the possible alternatives to bear fur, taking an in-depth look at contracts and costs and assessing the suitability of all fake fur options against a clear, defined criteria. Any review should speak directly to troops, taking their views seriously and ensuring they form part of any decision for the future. If he doesn't commit to this, Labour would do it in government. It is incredibly important that traditions must develop and adapt if they are to survive. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to discuss the Army's use of bearskins as headwear for the Household Division. I believe the country is proud of its military and the traditions of selfless service they represent. They're also proud of our record as a leading nation in supporting animal conservation and welfare. I'm pleased to have this opportunity to explain the government's position in greater detail, and I hope to dispel a few of the myths surrounding this issue. First, the cap itself. I don't need to tell the House that the bearskin worn by the Queen's Household Division is an iconic emblem of our country, whether it's seen outside Buckingham Palace or indeed on occasion outside Holyrood or Edinburgh Castle. They've been worn for more than 2 centuries by members of the Household Division, as the honourable gentleman pointed out, and they are a lasting reminder of that famous victory at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, when the 1st Regiment of Foot Guards defeated Napoleon's Grenadiers, and in doing so helped establish the circumstances in which the UK would remain at peace with European powers for 40 years, and with those of Western Europe for a century. Their reward was not just the title of the Grenadier Regiment, but the right for every soldier to wear a bearskin. Even today, the opportunity to don this cap is regarded as a great honour, whether they are the Grenadier Guards, the Scots Guards, or any of the 5 Foot Guards regiments. We are not unique in making use of ceremonial bearskin caps. Indeed, they are part of the uniform of some 13 other nations, from Canada and Kenya to Spain and Sweden. However, I would hazard a guess that it's the British bearskin that is most noted around the world. Can I make absolutely clear that the Army is not wedded to the material which makes up the cap? Where man-made alternatives to replace natural fur items provide a suitable, affordable and sustainable alternative to animal products, the MOD will use them. However, until that material is sourced and proven, the UK goes to great lengths to make sure that the pelts that make up our caps are procured in the most responsible way possible. I'll give way.
It's reassuring that the MOD will open themselves up to more sustainable and ethical products. But can the Minister explain what steps they've taken to explore these alternatives to bearskins thus far?
Absolutely. You are preempting me, sir, but I will. Sorry, Madam Chair. The honourable gentleman is preempting me, but I will get there. And there's been a long record stretching back to other parties being in government in which we have examined the alternatives. Let me be clear, Madam Chairman, as the Honourable Lady, the opposition spokesman said, she raised her fears, and I can reassure her that bears are never hunted to order for the MOD. Bear pelts used for the Queen's Guard ceremonial caps are sourced exclusively from Canada precisely because it is a regulated market and because Canada is a declared party to the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, CITES. A CITES permit is required for the export of pelts from Canada to the United Kingdom. Provincial, territorial, federal and international laws also provide strict trade regulations to protect against unlawful trade in black bears, both within Canada and internationally, and the pelts required are byproducts of what are legal and licensed hunts, authorised in Canada by provincial and territorial governments. The total number that we acquire, the honourable gentleman, the proposer, mentioned, I think it was 120 in 2020. The honourable gentleman might be right. My numbers are by financial year rather than calendar year. I have it down as 107 in 2020. We acquired 31 bearskins in 2021. And I've already, in response to the honourable gentleman from Ockerland, South Perthshire, put that into perspective. In other words, any reduction in the number of bearskins procured by the MOD would not have any meaningful impact on the Canadian conservation and population management policy. But I appreciate there is a point of principle that goes beyond that. I'd also like to say we're very sparing in the acquisitions we make. Our individual soldiers do not possess their own hats. They are shared within and cared for by the Household Division. And despite their constant use, every effort is made to carefully prolong the longevity of each ceremonial cap. I know the honourable gentleman has a concern that they don't last, Actually, they do usually last over a decade, and some have been making it through to as much as 60 years in use. They are carefully looked after as treasured items. None of this is to say that we would not be perfectly willing to embrace a faux fur material that is up to the job. The Department has already made clear that where a suitable, affordable and sustainable alternative to animal products exists, these will be used. The Honourable Lady, the opposition spokesman, referred to the faux fur used in the smaller Busby hats used by the King's Troop of the Royal Horse Artillery. Although I would mention that these hats don't need to be worn with such regularity or all year round in all manner of demanding conditions. The bearskin caps are taller, broader, made of longer fur and inherently weightier. They must also retain their distinctive shape and appearance for far longer durations than required of many other items of ceremonial wear. Finding a faux alternative, I will willingly wait, gentlemen.
I'm very grateful to the Minister for giving way, and in response to my honourable friend from Bury South, he confirmed, I think, that the government were open to the possibility that if there was a sustainable and viable option other than real fur, they would be open to it. If the honourable gentleman who moved the motion and others can demonstrate that such a product exists, would he then be willing, subject to cost and all of the other considerations that have to be taken into account, would he then be willing to switch to that product?
For the right honourable gentleman, absolutely. There is no, as I said right at the outset, we're not wedded to the material used. We are wedded to this iconic symbol for the British Army. If there is an alternative that works, that will be taken very seriously. Affordability, sustainability, there are other criteria, but the key thing is whether this material works. I'd willingly wait on children.
Thank you very much indeed. It sounds like we're making progress here, Madam Chair, which is a rarity in these things and quite exciting. So can the honourable gentleman give us a pathway? Can he agree to a meeting so that the manufacturers can turn up with these hats, can provide them, can agree to a timetable by which these will be analysed? And if they pass, great, we're all happy. If they fail, can the manufacturers get a breakdown of how they have failed so they can address the problems and we can progress?
I think perhaps I can help the honourable gentleman by going through the pathway we've already trodden and how that's happened right up to today. And we can see where we can go from there in my remarks. I will.
I thank the Minister for giving way. While we've been in this debate, I have contacted PETA, and they are ready and waiting to meet the Minister. And EcoPel's offer still stands. So, you know, they would bring the prototype hat to the meeting, and they could bring samples of other faux fur. So, the question to the Minister today is he willing to meet with them both to go through the options?
Let me go through what we're doing, if I may, Madam Chairman. As I was saying, finding a faux alternative is not without its challenges. Up to 2007, research was conducted by Defence Clothing into faux fur replacements. Over 50 different types were looked at, using many different fibres in many combinations, both synthetic and natural. None were found to be acceptable, many created static, and the fur stood on end. In 2007, PETA submitted 2 samples that the MOD agreed should be looked at in detail. A number of test methods were developed to compare faux fur with real fur to assess performance. Both samples were rejected as they allowed water penetration, did not shed water, absorbed water and did not then shake it off. 7 years later, in 2014, PETA approached the MOD about submitting more faux fur samples and wanted to know, understandably, the required parameters. The tests devised previously were formalised and agreed with PETA as the starting point that the faux fur had to meet before being considered as a replacement. It was agreed the test house would be Intertech and MOD would be sent a copy of any report. 2018, PETA submitted a sample to Intertech that was not taken forward as it showed unacceptable water penetration. 2019, PETA submitted a sample to Intertech with improved water penetration results. Whilst the water penetration was greatly reduced, the wet appearance was unacceptable with rat tails and dripping. although this wasn't passed to the MOD to verify. In 2020, PETA submitted a sample to Intertech in February with greatly reduced water penetration, but again a poor wet look. Another sample was tested in December 2020 with nil penetration, although there were still problems with appearance. In 2021, the testing house shared that report with the MOD. We don't have, I'm afraid, any detail of the fabric or the supplier or technical details such as how to seal stitch holes and any seams needed to retain the waterproof barrier. It is yet to be established if the sample could be formed over the wicker framework to resemble a real fur, and a trial is needed to gauge performance in use. For example, does the material succumb to static problems, and what does it look like if wet? I was pleased to hear from one of the honourable gentlemen, from the honourable gentleman from Bury South, I believe, that there has now been a faux fur bearskin created over a wicker frame. That sounds good news. Not something I was aware of before this debate. Earlier this year, PETA issued another report in conjunction with their campaign claiming that all 5 tests that the MOD require have now been proven in the use of faux fur. However, we are thus far unsighted on those latest test results. To both calm down excited honourable members, but also to give them encouragement, I think the honourable lady for Rutherglen and Hamilton said it's a long time to make policy and changing policy. There's no policy issue here to be concerned of. If there is a faux fur alternative that works and gets over those hurdles, then we'll look very quickly at affordability and sustainability and the other ticks in the box we need to make. But there's no opposition at all to the idea of using faux fur if that can be proved to work. And as I say, in other circumstances, we have actively embraced faux fur alternatives and done so very willingly. I would be very keen to see whether this works here. I think the proposer said that there are questions to answer. Well, help us, if PETA would help us answer those questions by providing to the experts in the Ministry of Defence the material, the faux fur bearskin that they've created, we will without doubt have a look and take those results very seriously. The House can rest assured that we will continue to keep these matters under review. And as I say, if PETA or any other body wishes to share details of any test with us, they will be analysed. The best means to help us to make faux fur supply our future use is to share with us the data. And if it proves to be right, if we can generally believe that there will be a viable faux fur alternative, I would be very, very happy to take that forward and to test it then against sustainability and affordability and other criteria. At the moment, the jury is out. What we need to see is the results of those tests, which have not yet been shared with us, evidence that this can be made to work and to hit our 5 criteria. If we have that evidence, we would happily take this on. But that is the hurdle that we need to get at, and that's in the hands of others. We're willing to receive any information. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Martyn Day to wind up.
Thank you. And on behalf of the Petitions Committee, may I thank the members who have came along today. We've had, perhaps we're lacking in numbers, but we've had good informed content, and I think there's been I hope, some progress made on the issue. And I take some heart from the comments made by the Minister that the MOD will use man-made alternatives if they can be proven to be satisfactory. So I just repeat my call again, and I hope that perhaps through my office we could arrange a meeting with the Minister and with PETA to take this forward, to look at the evidence and then move on to the next stage. And I hope the Minister will be appreciative when he gets a letter from the office to that effect. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered E-petition 602285 relating to the use of real bearskin hats by the Queen's Guards. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Order, order.
I'm trying to make these made